Nora Bennett, a 32-year-old. Everyone thinks they can name the moment a life turns. Some people point to the thunderclap and call it fate. For me, it was smaller. The way a hand tightened around a phone, the way a laugh changed, the slow inflation of a calendar with other people's names. I had a good job, a man I loved, and a best friend I'd known since we were kids. I thought that was enough. I was wrong. Ethan and I had been together for 4 years. He was brilliant in his own way, quick with a joke, certain about the next investment, prone to saying the right thing when the room got awkward. We shared a small apartment and a home office where he'd code and I'd untangle network bugs. Our weekends used to be cheap and perfect. Takeout, a dumb movie, the kind of lazy comfort that never felt urgent. Then 2 months ago, everything shifted. At first, it was subtle. Ethan started choosing status over solitude. Where he used to be pleased with a pizza and a late-night documentary, now he was enthused by reservation lists and members-only previews. New restaurants, boutique openings, a charity gala here and there, things he hadn't cared about before. When I asked, he smiled like he always had and said, "It's for my career, Nora. It's networking. You wouldn't understand." He never said it cruelly. He said it like someone describing a weather change I couldn't possibly feel. Then came the gifts. A watch that cost more than my rent. A bag he said he'd won through a client. The little things that smell of someone else's pockets. The stories were always plausible. Plausible enough to make me feel petty for asking. Our friend group cheered him on. Leah would be over for a game night and gush about Ethan's ambition, clapping him on the back. She said things like, "You're so lucky to have someone with that kind of drive." It sounded like praise, but in retrospect it was scouting. I tried to explain the unease to myself as coincidence. People change, priorities shift. But my chest tightened, and the tightening turned to an itch I couldn't scratch. I'm not proud of the step I took next. I told myself it was practicality. I told myself a professional who spends her life inside code had the right to look under the hood. Ethan's laptop crashed the week before a big project. He asked if he could use our shared home office computer for a few days. Small favors, I thought. As a systems engineer, I know how fragile user profiles can be. I offered to set up a fresh user for him so his files wouldn't mix with mine. It was a simple permission, an okay gesture. Before I created the profile, I installed a quietly discreet keylogger and a remote viewing client. A tiny, tasteless betrayal that felt like self-defense. The trust, I had decided, had already left the room. The first night I watched from my laptop in the living room while he thought the house slept. He logged into an email I'd never seen before. Messages surfaced, not light flirtations, but plans. Notations about meetings that didn't exist, names I didn't know. I saw the tender little phrases folded into calculation. And then a second thread, more worrying. A string of messages to someone named Juliana Croft. A quick search turned up Juliana the philanthropist, a woman married into Croft money, and the kind of social orbit that bends fortunes. The messages between Ethan and Juliana read like a careful, practiced seduction. Compliments that double as leverage, promises made with a ledger in the margins. At the same time, there were messages to Leah. Leah, who'd always been my best friend, the person who knew the story of the scar on my wrist and lent me the jacket when I was cold. The messages between Leah and Ethan were more intimate than friends should be. They planned small things together, laughed about private jokes, and calculated a timeline for when the public would understand. They mocked my job, my small apartment, the very life we'd been building in the margins. The messages weren't just betrayal, they were a purchase order for a new life I wouldn't be invited to share. My chest went cold and then went hard with a new kind of clarity. They thought they were being clever. They thought I wouldn't notice the micro-shifts. They were wrong. I didn't explode. I cataloged. I watched receipts and reservations fold into the picture like tiles in a mosaic. Hotel bookings under names that didn't match the conference itineraries. A boutique suite paid in a name I'd seen paired with Juliana. Screenshots of courier confirmations for gifts. I let the evidence accumulate, and with every small discovery, the anger gave way to a deliberate surgical calm. A week later, I drove 4 hours to a harbor town I'd found on a receipt. I told Ethan I'd visit my sick aunt. The truth was quieter. I sat at a cafe across from the harbor restaurant until the light turned golden and the glassware caught the sun. I spent 7 hours there, feeling ridiculous and steady in equal measure. And then I saw them, Juliana and Ethan stepping out of the restaurant, laughing, an arm around a shoulder. The detail that made the photograph valuable was small and absurd. A custom watch on Juliana's wrist, a distinctive face I'd memorized from a portfolio shot. I lifted my phone and, without thinking about the morality of it, framed a single clean photo. Juliana, Ethan, the watch catching the sunlight like an accusation. That photo became the weight in my pocket, the instrument I'd been collecting build-up to. They were getting careless. Leah and Ethan had grown bolder, and Juliana had the complacency of someone who believed money could iron out any discomfort. They planned a night to perform their final transgression, a celebratory dinner, big news, and they wanted witnesses. They wanted to turn my private hurt into a public spectacle. I spent the next 4 days preparing like someone packing for a surgical strike. I opened a new bank account and moved the money I'd saved out of our joint account, leaving only a quiet balance behind. I consulted a lawyer and had an eviction notice ready because Ethan's name wasn't on the deed. I called movers and had Leah's boxes packed into storage in the early hours. By Friday morning, there were only traces, the single photograph on my phone, the noise the movers had made 3 rooms away, and a house that felt suddenly empty. The evening arrived lush and staged. Leah and Ethan glowed as if they'd invented the sun. They ordered the expensive bottle, did the practiced toasts, and then Leah rose, voice bright and rehearsed. "Thank you all for being here," she said, eyes sweeping the table. "This year forced me to grow, to find where I belong. I just want to say, I found the person I was meant for. Ethan and I have been seeing each other for months, and tonight I'm thrilled to announce we're engaged." The room exploded into applause. Everyone turned to me with the look they reserve for someone they think is about to fall apart. I did not feel like falling apart. I felt like someone whose map had unfolded exactly as she'd drawn it. I smiled the way you smile when a machine clicks into place. Then I unlocked my phone. I don't remember the breath I took. I only remember selecting the single photograph, selecting Ethan's contact, and hitting AirDrop. His phone chimed almost instantly. He glanced at it. For a moment there was annoyance, then a small widening at his pupils, like a camera shutter under strobe light. Color left his face. He looked from his screen to Leah, to me. The sound in the restaurant dropped. You could hear the waiter's shoes on the tile. Leah's smile slid. It was the first honest thing she had shown all night. "When was this taken?" Ethan said, voice low. Leah fumbled and leaned in as if proximity could hide the screen. She claimed she had been at a work event. She said any number of evasive things, words that always sound thin in bright rooms. Ethan shoved the phone into her face. "This was taken last Saturday," he demanded. "You told me you were visiting your aunt." The color left Leah entirely. She could not find a new story big enough to cover the picture. The ring came out like a prop cheapened by the moment. Ethan stood, the chair scraping loud in the sudden silent air. "We're done," he said, and then he hurled something on the floor. The ring, the performance, their plan. He did not look back as he walked out. Leah sat there exposed, her carefully curated future unraveling in the overhead light. The applause had dissolved into open mouths and the kind of awkwardness that kills conversation. I paid my share of the bill. I said only, "This has been an eventful evening," and I left. Outside, the night was ordinary and criminally indifferent. I walked home with an image in my pocket and a strange, cold clarity in my chest. When I turned the key and stepped in, I felt a silence that felt like possibility. I locked the door. I had one last thread to pull. I created an anonymous account and sent the photo to a woman connected to Juliana's household. The caption was simple: "Your wife, last Saturday." The next morning, an unknown number called my work. A voice on the line asked for more. There are things you cannot buy back, and there are others you can use to level an entire structure. I had both. I went to my kitchen and poured a drink. The house was quiet. Outside, somewhere, a plan someone had believed in collapsed. Inside, I felt the cold beginning of something that smelled an awful lot like victory. The knock didn't come like in the movies. No thunder, no rain, just a relentless, ordinary pounding that made the peephole shake. I already knew whose fist it was by the rhythm, the way impatience eats at the pause between hits. "Nora, open the door," Ethan's voice rasped through the metal. "We need to talk." The intercom camera caught him from a high, indifferent angle. Hair disheveled, jacket half on, half off, the expression of a man trying to remember which lie he'd told last. I didn't go to the door. I stood in the kitchen and watched the tiny screen, one finger on the speak button, the house around me clean in a way it hadn't been in months. "There's nothing to talk about," I said, letting the speaker turn my voice flat. "We're done." He flinched like I'd pressed a bruise. The anger vanished. It happens fast with some people, from domination to supplication, like a shudder. "No, baby, no. Leah's announcement. You know how she is. It got ahead of us, you and me. We're complicated. I love you. It was always you." His eyes flicked around, calculating where the camera's edges were. I wondered if he could taste the lie in his own mouth, whether the words had a familiar bitterness by now. "Your belongings are in a storage unit," I said. "The key and address are en route to your parents' house. Overnight courier." He stared into the lens like it could be persuaded. I made a mistake. The truth was less cinematic. He had made a series of choices and enjoyed the returns until the cost came due. I turned off the intercom and stood in the soft hum of my refrigerator, the quiet, a new kind of music. You don't need violins for closure. A compressor will do. The unknown number call I'd received that morning came back to me while I rinsed a glass. The voice on the line had been warm and precise, the kind of tone money buys and crisis requires. "This is from Mr. Adrian Croft's office," the woman had said, "regarding a photograph you sent a member of our household." She didn't say Juliana's name. She didn't have to. She asked, politely, if I had more. I did. I forwarded curated receipts, hotel bookings in Juliana's orbit, courier slips, the key-logged exchanges stripped of anything that made me ugly and left only what made them true. I didn't ask for anything. Helping the truth along was its own reward. The fallout began before lunch. News doesn't leak. It detonates. Adrian Croft did not do hysterics. He did paperwork and precision. An attorney's letter landed in Juliana's inbox, and, by some sympathetic magic known only to high society, the rumor bloomed on the right phones. A family office shut doors. A security team changed codes. A foundation's board calendar rearranged itself with the violence of polite refusal. Somewhere, a man with Adrian's temperament placed a call that ended a contract Juliana had been savoring for months. The city absorbed it all without blinking. Ethan's pounding faded, replaced by that private, weightless feeling I'd started to recognize as relief. People imagine vindication as fire, but sometimes it's air. A pressure lifting off the sternum, room created where there had been none. Leah texted an hour later. The message came as a 9-missive avalanche, each bubble a slice of theater. "I'm sorry. It's not what you think. He told me you two were basically over. Please, can we talk?" Then the spin. "You humiliated me tonight. That was cruel." After that, the last cards. "If you ever cared about me, don't do this." I turned my phone over and let the screen dim. The next week tasted metallic. Things that were supposed to be private slithered into public forms. A whisper in a group chat. A sharp little smile across a break room. Someone from our circle, the kind with a long memory and a short conscience, started carrying water for Ethan. The story warped. I became possessive, paranoid, jealous. The picture became photoshopped. The evidence became out of context. It was sloppy work and would have maybe worked if Leah weren't in survival mode and if men like Adrian didn't have sharper knives. On day 5, Leah cracked first. She didn't apologize for the affair. Apologies require the acknowledgement of a boundary, and Leah's life was a map of roads without fences. But she did call, voice shredded. She had gone scorched earth in the group chat, blamed Ethan, called Juliana a predator, claimed she'd been misled and manipulated and swept away by affairs beyond her power. The performance was for her reputation. The effect was that truth stopped needing my mouth to speak it. On day 6, an embossed envelope found my mailbox. A law firm I knew by reputation and nightmare. Inside, A letter claiming, in authoritative italics, that my 4-year relationship with Ethan constituted a common law marriage, that I owed him financial support, that he was entitled to a portion of my assets, up to and including a share of the value of my house, and the flourish that my public spectacle at the restaurant had caused him emotional distress and defamation. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so precisely on schedule. My attorney had been in my phone for a week. I sent her the letter and watched her reply arrive in drafts on the shared document we'd built like a trap. The response was a single, perfect page. The first paragraph affirmed what the state recognized: no common law marriage, not here, not us. The second attached the deed for my home, purchased before I ever met Ethan, in my name alone. The third included the already served eviction notice. The final paragraph did not threaten so much as invite. Should Ethan proceed with his frivolous claim, we would subpoena parties with direct knowledge of his infidelity and financial entanglements. One Ms. Leah Harper and one Ms. Juliana Croft, noting that Ms. Croft's high-profile marital proceedings might make her reluctant to testify, but her financial arrangements with Ethan would be relevant and discoverable. We never heard from that firm again. Meanwhile, Adrian Croft moved like a chess player who finally cared about the board. There were filings I will never see and conversations I was never meant to hear. But the ripples were visible. Juliana's public calendar evaporated. A glossy magazine quietly replaced her cover story with a pastry chef. An announcement about a joint venture was postponed indefinitely. Word landed, not a rumor, a fact, that Adrian had secured control of a subsidiary Juliana's circle had been positioning for months. People called it a hostile takeover. I thought of it as marital arithmetic. Ethan went to ground. Men like him are good at disappearing just long enough for the next party to forget the last one. He changed states. I got a forwarding email from an old friend who wrote, with the glee of someone who loves final acts, that he'd been seen at a mid-range bar telling a confused bartender that he'd been set up. There was a time when the phrase would have made me ache. Now it made me want to sleep. There's an ugliness to victory that nobody warns you about. After the adrenaline drains, you're left with rooms that smell different without someone else's products, rooms that sound different because a certain laugh is gone. I stood in the home office and ran my hand over the empty strip of desk where Ethan used to leave cables in knots. It felt like touching a scar you didn't notice forming. 6 months passed. The news cycle as it relates to rich people's mistakes is concurrently brief and eternal. It burns bright and moves on. It also never dies. Living shadow lives in search engines and brunch tables. The enormous divorce of the Crofts, the litigation, the settlement whisper numbers, the corporate reorganizations, was a white noise machine you can hear from any room if you listen. Adrian did not emerge kind. He emerged correct. I can't decide which I respect more. Leah became what she had always feared, a person people stopped inviting. Her brand of brightness curdled without an audience. And there's a math to social capital that cannot be undone by better lipstick. She messaged me twice, once to accuse me of destroying her life, once to ask me to meet as if we were still children. I didn't answer either. Someone sent me a photo of her at a charity event months later, smile wide and slightly brittle, eyes searching the room like a person trying to locate the emergency exit. My life got small in the ways that matter and large in the ways that count. I changed my number. I bought a kettle that doesn't scream when it boils. I learned the names of the women who own the bodega on the corner. I put the key from the storage unit in a drawer with passports and warranties. Some nights I imagine Ethan using it, peeling the tape off a box and seeing the life we built flattened into cardboard. Other nights I don't think of him at all. People still ask whether I regret the surveillance, whether I crossed a line, whether the line was already a field of trampled grass by the time I took my first step across. I answer the way I debug, by refusing to pretend that the output is divorced from the input. You don't write code to be good. You write code to be honest. The machine doesn't care what you meant. It only does what you told it to do. They told me 100 different ways that I wasn't paying attention. They told me by how they angled their phones and how they set their calendars and how they practiced their speeches in other people's mirrors. I paid attention. I listened. And then I rewrote the script. If there's a moral, I'm not qualified to deliver it. I did not forgive. I did not set them free with my blessing. I pressed buttons. I signed papers. I told the truth to people who could do something with it. And when the dust settled, I went to bed in a quiet apartment with a door that locked and a future that did not require anyone else's permission. I won, not by screaming, not by breaking glasses in restaurants. I won by thinking, by planning, by believing my own eyes. Sometimes victory isn't a trumpet. Sometimes it's the soft click of a latch on a door you close behind you, and the cooling, spacious knowledge that nobody else has a key.